Imagine waking up one morning, and instead of the familiar weight of anxiety pressing down on your chest, you feel calm, clear, ready. Not because your problems disappeared overnight, but because you've fundamentally transformed how you respond to life itself. This transformation isn't theoretical, it's accessible to you starting today. 3 years ago, I found myself at a breaking point. My business had failed, a relationship had ended, and everything I thought defined me was stripped away. In that emptiness, I discovered something that humans have known for over 2,000 years, but that many of us have forgotten: the ancient wisdom of Stoicism. What I'm about to share with you isn't another set of quick fixes or empty promises. These are 12 golden rules distilled from timeless philosophical principles that have guided emperors through wars, prisoners through captivity, and ordinary people through the extraordinary challenges of everyday life. The Stoics, philosophers like Marcus Aurelius, Seneca, and Epictetus, weren't detached academics theorizing from ivory towers. They were practical men wrestling with real problems, seeking answers to the fundamental question: how does one live well in an unpredictable world? Their answer was both simple and profound. By focusing intensely on what we can control, our judgments, actions, and responses, while accepting with equanimity what we cannot. These 12 rules I'm about to share aren't merely intellectual concepts to understand, they're practices to embody. Each rule builds upon the others, creating a framework for approaching any situation with clarity, courage, and wisdom. Whether you're facing career uncertainty, relationship difficulties, health challenges, or simply the quiet desperation of a life not fully lived, these principles offer a pathway forward, not by changing your external circumstances first, but by transforming your internal relationship to them. As we explore these rules together, I invite you to approach them not as abstract philosophies, but as practical tools, mental algorithms that, when applied consistently, rewire how you process experience itself. I've watched these principles transform not only my own life, but the lives of thousands who have applied them. The stressed executive who found calm amidst chaos, the grieving parent who discovered strength in acceptance, the ambitious young professional who learned that true success comes not from external achievements, but from living virtuously. This transformation is available to you starting today. Not through some magical thinking or positive affirmations, but through the deliberate practice of these time-tested principles that align with the deepest truths of human psychology. So let's begin this journey together. From reactivity to response, from anxiety to presence, from living at the mercy of circumstances to creating meaning regardless of them. These 12 golden rules will not only change how you experience life's challenges, but how you experience yourself. Rule number 1: control what you can, accept what you cannot. This principle forms the cornerstone of Stoic philosophy and, I would argue, of any meaningful approach to life. The dichotomy of control is simple to understand but profound in its implications. Some things are within our power and some things are not. Within our power are our judgments, our desires, our aversions, and our own actions. Outside our power are our bodies, possessions, reputations, career titles, and the actions of others. The Stoic teacher Epictetus put it simply: make the best use of what is in your power and take the rest as it happens. Consider how much mental energy you expend daily worrying about things entirely outside your influence, whether it will rain during your outdoor event, whether someone will approve of your presentation, whether the economy will affect your investments. This isn't just wasted energy, it's the primary source of our unnecessary suffering. Instead, try this exercise. For the next 24 hours before reacting to any situation, ask yourself, is this within my control? If it isn't, consciously pivot your attention to your response rather than the circumstance itself. When your flight is delayed, you cannot control the weather or airline operations, but you can control how you use that time, perhaps to read, meditate, or connect with a fellow traveler. When someone criticizes your work, you cannot control their opinion, but you can control whether you respond defensively or with curiosity about potential improvement. This isn't about passive resignation. It's about directing your finite energy where it can actually make a difference. Consider Marcus Aurelius, who ruled the Roman Empire during plague and constant warfare. Despite these enormous external challenges, he focused on what he could control: his character, decisions, and responses. The liberation in this approach is immediate. Once you stop demanding that reality conform to your preferences and instead focus on responding excellently to whatever occurs, an enormous burden lifts. The universe is not personally conspiring against you. It's simply unfolding according to countless factors beyond any individual's control. Practice identifying what aspects of any situation fall into each category: controllable and uncontrollable. Write them down if necessary. Then consciously release your attachment to controlling the uncontrollable while fully engaging with what you can influence. This mental habit alone can transform your experience of life within days, not years. Your blood pressure will lower, your relationships will improve, and paradoxically, you'll become more effective precisely because you're no longer wasting energy trying to control the uncontrollable. Rule number 2, practice negative visualization daily. This may sound counterintuitive in our positivity-obsessed culture, but the Stoics understood something profound about human psychology. We don't appreciate what we have until we contemplate its loss. The practice they developed, called premeditatio malorum, or premeditation of evils, involves deliberately visualizing the loss of things you value: health, relationships, possessions, not to induce anxiety, but to foster deep gratitude and preparedness. Try this. Each morning, spend 5 minutes contemplating what your life would be like without something you currently take for granted. Perhaps it's your eyesight, allowing you to see the faces of those you love. Maybe it's the functioning of your legs, enabling you to walk freely. Or the presence of a family member or friend who enriches your life daily. This isn't morbid thinking, it's reality calibration. Everything we have is essentially on loan to us for an uncertain period. By acknowledging this truth rather than hiding from it, we simultaneously prepare ourselves for inevitable changes while deepening our appreciation for the present. Seneca advised his students to rehearse poverty occasionally by living simply for a few days, eating basic food and wearing simple clothes. This wasn't self-punishment, but a way to remove the fear of losing material comforts by proving to yourself that you could adapt if necessary. When you practice negative visualization regularly, something remarkable happens. Your anxiety about potential losses actually decreases rather than increases. Why? Because you've mentally rehearsed adaptability. You've reminded yourself of human resilience in the face of loss. Additionally, this practice dissolves the hedonic adaptation that robs us of joy. We quickly become accustomed to our advantages, the comfortable home, the loving relationship, the healthy body, and reset them as our baseline expectation. Negative visualization reawakens us to their value. A business executive I worked with applied this principle during a period of tremendous success. Each morning he would visualize his company failing, his reputation damaged, starting over from scratch. Rather than creating paranoia, it produced profound gratitude for current circumstances while keeping him humble and innovative, preventing the complacency that often accompanies achievement. Make this a daily practice. 5 minutes contemplating the impermanence of what you value. Notice how your interaction with people and experiences changes when you no longer take them for granted. The ordinary becomes extraordinary when viewed through the lens of its potential absence. Rule number 3, turn obstacles into opportunities. The impediment to action advances action. What stands in the way becomes the way. These words from Marcus Aurelius encapsulate a transformative approach to life's inevitable challenges. Rather than seeing obstacles as unfortunate interruptions to your plans, recognize them as the actual path to growth and excellence. Consider the story of Zeno, the founder of Stoicism. A successful merchant, he lost everything when his ship sank. Stranded in Athens, this catastrophic loss led him to philosophy and ultimately to founding one of history's most influential philosophical traditions. His apparent disaster contained the seeds of his greatest contribution. This principle operates at both the practical and psychological levels. Practically, constraints often force innovation. When Thomas Edison's lab burned down, destroying years of work, his response was extraordinary. "We just got rid of a lot of rubbish," he said, and within weeks had invented the phonograph. Psychologically, obstacles test and strengthen our character. Just as physical resistance builds muscle, psychological resistance builds mental fortitude, but only if we engage with it rather than avoid it. Try this perspective shift. When facing a challenge, rather than asking, "Why is this happening to me?" ask, "What is this teaching me? What quality or skill must I develop to overcome this?" This simple reframing transforms victimhood into agency. A single mother in my workshop applied this principle to her overwhelming responsibilities. Instead of seeing her situation as an unfair burden, she recognized that it was developing extraordinary resilience, time management, and prioritization skills that her colleagues with more comfortable circumstances weren't forced to develop. This approach doesn't deny difficulty, it transforms our relationship to it. The obstacle remains, but its power to disturb our inner peace diminishes as we focus on the opportunity within it. History's most remarkable achievements have often emerged directly from constraints. Shakespeare created masterpieces within the strict limitations of iambic pentameter. The pressure of space limitations drove computer engineers to develop increasingly powerful microchips. Today, identify your most significant current challenge. Write down 3 potential opportunities it presents. Skills you might develop, perspectives you might gain, or new directions it might open. The obstacle hasn't changed, but your relationship to it has. Remember, the fire that melts butter hardens steel. The difference isn't in the fire, but in the material. Train yourself to be steel in the face of difficulty, transformed rather than destroyed by life's inevitable heat. Rule number 4. Cultivate indifference to indifferent things. The Stoics made a crucial distinction that can revolutionize your priorities. They classified everything in life into 3 categories: the good, virtue and excellence of character; the bad, vice and moral failings; and the indifferent, everything else: wealth, health, reputation, pleasure, and all external circumstances. This doesn't mean that health or relationships don't matter at all, but rather that they don't constitute your fundamental worth or capacity for a good life. They are preferred indifference, things we naturally select when available but whose absence cannot prevent us from living well. Modern society bombards us with messages that directly contradict this wisdom. We're told that without certain possessions, achievements, or physical attributes, we cannot be happy or worthy. This creates an endless treadmill of acquisition and anxiety. The liberation in this principle is profound. When you recognize that your job title, bank balance, physical appearance, and others' opinions are ultimately indifferent to your capacity for virtue and inner tranquility, you reclaim enormous power. Try this exercise. Make a list of what you genuinely value. Then honestly assess how much of your daily energy goes toward things that, from the perspective of your deathbed, would be relatively insignificant. Are you sacrificing health for wealth? Integrity for approval? Present joy for future security that may never arrive? This isn't about becoming detached or careless. It's about right-sizing your emotional investment. Care deeply about your character, your contributions, and how you treat others. Care appropriately, but not excessively, about external outcomes. A CEO I worked with experienced this shift during a health crisis. After decades of defining himself by his company's performance, he realized that his character, how he responded to illness with courage and grace, mattered far more than quarterly results. This perspective didn't make him less effective. Paradoxically, it made him more effective by removing the desperate attachment to outcomes that had clouded his judgment. Epictetus, who lived as both a slave and later a respected teacher, demonstrated that external circumstances need not determine internal states. Make the best use of what is in your power, he taught, and take the rest as it happens. Practice this principle by intentionally detaching your sense of well-being from external events. When good things happen, enjoy them without clinging. When difficulties arise, face them without being defined by them. Your worth and capacity for a good life remain constant regardless of circumstance. Rule number 5, live according to nature. When the Stoics advised living according to nature, they weren't suggesting we abandon civilization for the forest. They meant aligning our lives with both human nature and the nature of reality itself. Human nature, they recognized, is fundamentally rational and social. We thrive when we develop our capacity for reason and when we contribute to the welfare of others. The nature of reality is change and impermanence. Everything flows, nothing remains the same, and resistance to this basic truth creates unnecessary suffering. Living according to nature means embracing our role as thinking, contributing members of the human community, while accepting the universe's unchangeable patterns without complaint. In practice, this manifests several ways. First, it means developing our rational faculties, learning to think clearly, question assumptions, and make decisions based on principles rather than impulse. The Stoics were not cold calculators. They understood reason as including our capacity for compassion and ethical insight. Second, it means recognizing our social nature. Despite myths of self-made success, humans evolved as cooperative beings. Our greatest achievements and deepest satisfactions come through meaningful contribution and connection. When we live self-centered lives, we contradict our nature and experience alienation. Third, it means aligning with, rather than fighting against reality's basic patterns. Seasons change, bodies age, civilizations rise and fall. Working with these currents rather than against them brings wisdom and peace. Consider how much of modern life contradicts these natural patterns. We stay awake under artificial light long after our bodies signal for rest. We isolate in competitive individualism despite our social nature. We rage against inevitable changes instead of finding meaning within them. Try this. For 1 week, make decisions by asking, what action aligns with my rational nature and benefits the larger community? Notice how different these choices might be from those driven by habit, social pressure, or temporary pleasure. A novelist I worked with applied this principle when considering whether to write what he felt would be a meaningful but possibly less commercially successful book. by focusing on what action would express his highest rational nature and contribute most valuably to others, rather than what would maximize immediate reward, he found clarity and peace with his decision. Living according to nature provides a reliable compass when other guides fail us. External rules vary by culture and era, but the fundamental patterns of human flourishing remain remarkably consistent. When we align with them, we experience what the Stoics called flowing with life, rather than struggling against its current. Rule number 6, memento mori, remember death. Let us prepare our minds as if we'd come to the very end of life. Let us postpone nothing. Seneca's words capture the Stoic practice of memento mori, the remembrance of death not as a morbid obsession, but as the ultimate clarifying force in life. We modern people go to extraordinary lengths to avoid contemplating our mortality. This avoidance doesn't protect us, it robs us of the perspective that makes life rich and meaningful. When we forget death, we forget to live fully. The Stoics recommended regular contemplation of mortality precisely because it burns away the trivial concerns that consume our days. Imagine truly absorbing the reality that you will die, perhaps today, perhaps in decades, but certainly someday. From that perspective, does it matter if someone criticized your presentation? If you didn't get the promotion? If your social media post didn't get enough engagement? Try this daily practice. Each morning upon waking, remind yourself, I may not survive to see the evening. Each evening before sleep, I may not wake to see another morning. This isn't to induce anxiety, but to inspire presence and proper prioritization. A hospice nurse shared with me the most common regrets she heard from dying patients. Working too much, maintaining petty grievances, failing to express love, sacrificing joy for security, and living according to others' expectations rather than authentic desires. These deathbed realizations can become your midlife corrections if you're willing to face mortality now. The Emperor Marcus Aurelius kept a memento mori practice despite, or perhaps because of, his extraordinary power. You could leave life right now, he reminded himself. Let that determine what you do and say and think. This perspective didn't paralyze him, it energized him to focus on what truly mattered. Death awareness also dissolves our tendency toward postponement. I'll spend time with family after this project. I'll pursue my passion after retirement. I'll reconcile with my siblings someday. Death reminds us that someday is not guaranteed. A physician I worked with instituted a memento mori reflection every morning. Rather than increasing his anxiety, it paradoxically reduced it by highlighting what actually deserved his concern. Minor conflicts and setbacks lost their power when viewed through the lens of finitude. Make death your advisor, not your enemy. Let it strip away pretense and pettiness. Let it reveal what you truly value when all the noise is silenced. Far from diminishing life, this awareness magnifies it, turning ordinary moments into precious gifts rather than entitlements. Rule number 7. Practice voluntary discomfort. Set aside a certain number of days during which you shall be content with the scantiest and cheapest fare, with rough and coarse clothing, saying to yourself the while, is this the condition that I feared? In this instruction, Seneca describes what modern Stoics call voluntary discomfort, the deliberate practice of temporarily experiencing inconvenience or hardship. This practice serves multiple purposes. First, it inoculates us against future difficulties by proving our adaptability. Second, it develops the vital virtue of self-control. Third, it generates genuine appreciation for comforts we ordinarily take for granted. In our comfort-obsessed culture, we've become extraordinarily intolerant of even minor discomforts. We climate control our environments to the perfect temperature, carry snacks to avoid momentary hunger, and structure our digital environments to minimize friction or frustration. While apparently making life better, this constant comfort-seeking actually weakens our psychological resilience. Try implementing these practices regularly. Take cold showers. Fast for 24 hours, sleep on the floor, walk instead of drive. Turn off your phone for a weekend. Engage in difficult physical exercise. Deliberately choose the longer line at the store. These small voluntary hardships develop what the Stoics called the inner citadel, a fortress of mental strength that remains unshaken by external circumstances. When you've deliberately practiced discomfort, unexpected hardships lose much of their power to disturb you. A business executive I coached committed to one voluntary discomfort practice weekly. She would fast on Mondays, take public transportation instead of her car on Wednesdays, and sleep without air conditioning on summer Fridays. Within months, she reported significantly reduced reactivity to workplace stress and greater confidence in her ability to handle whatever challenges emerged. This practice doesn't glorify suffering for its own sake. Rather, it recognizes that discomfort avoidance creates fragility, while reasonable exposure builds anti-fragility, the quality of growing stronger under stress, like a muscle under resistance. Musonius Rufus, a Stoic teacher, emphasized that theoretical understanding of virtue was insufficient. One must train both mind and body through practice. Just as an aspiring musician must play scales, not just read about them, the aspiring Stoic must experience, not just contemplate, the principles. Start small with voluntary discomfort, gradually increasing the challenge as your resilience grows. Notice how quickly the initial discomfort fades and how the anticipated suffering almost always exceeds the actual experience. The ultimate benefit of this practice extends beyond resilience. By proving that you can be content with less, you liberate yourself from the constant acquisitive drive that keeps many perpetually dissatisfied despite abundance. Rule number 8, master your judgments. People are not disturbed by things, but by the views they take of them. This insight from Epictetus reveals perhaps the most transformative Stoic principle. What causes our emotional reactions is not external events themselves, but the judgments and interpretations we attach to them. Between stimulus and response lies the crucial space of judgment. Within this space, often just milliseconds, we assign meaning, attribute intention, forecast consequences, and determine our response. Most of us have never learned to identify, question, or modify these automatic judgments. The difference between resilient and reactive people isn't their circumstances, but their relationship to them. Someone cuts you off in traffic. Is this evidence that people are selfish and society is declining? Or simply that someone is in a hurry, perhaps due to an emergency you know nothing about? The event is identical. The judgment creates entirely different emotional experiences. Try this practice. For 1 week, whenever you feel a negative emotion arising, pause and identify the underlying judgment. Ask yourself, what interpretation am I attaching to this event? Is this the only possible interpretation? Is it necessarily true? Then generate at least 3 alternative interpretations. A corporate manager applied this practice when her presentation was interrupted by a senior executive. Her initial judgment, "He's disrespecting me and undermining my authority," created anger and defensiveness. When prompted to generate alternatives, she considered, perhaps he's under time pressure. Maybe he has information I need, and he might be trying to help by adding context. By recognizing the judgment as separate from the event itself, she could respond strategically rather than reactively. The interruption remained the same. Her relationship to it transformed. This isn't positive thinking or denial of reality. It's the recognition that what we call reality is always filtered through our perceptual and conceptual frameworks. The Stoics taught that we can never control all external events, but we always have some degree of control over our interpretations of them. Marcus Aurelius practiced this principle when he wrote, If you are distressed by anything external, the pain is not due to the thing itself, but to your estimate of it, and this you have the power to revoke at any moment. Work especially with judgments containing words like always, never, should, must, and can't. These absolutist terms often signal rigid thinking that creates unnecessary suffering. Replace them with more accurate, flexible language that acknowledges complexity and possibility. The mastery of judgment doesn't happen overnight. It requires consistent practice and self-awareness. But even small improvements in this area yield disproportionate benefits in emotional well-being and effective action. Rule number 9. Be a role model, not a critic. In our critique-heavy culture, the Stoics offer contrarian wisdom. The most effective way to influence others is not through criticism, but through personal example. As Epictetus advised, don't explain your philosophy. Embody it. We waste enormous energy trying to change others through argument, criticism, or complaint. This approach rarely works and often creates resistance. Meanwhile, we neglect the one domain where we have genuine power, our own behavior. The Stoics recognize that humans learn primarily through observation, not instruction. Children adopt the behaviors they witness, not the ones they're told about. Adults are no different. We're moved more by example than exhortation. Try this shift in approach. Instead of criticizing someone for being unreliable, become a model of reliability yourself. Rather than lamenting your organization's lack of innovation, become an example of creative thinking. Instead of complaining about political divisiveness, demonstrate respectful dialogue with those whose views differ from yours. This principle applies especially in parenting and leadership. Children and team members develop in response to what they see, not what they're told. The disconnect between instruction and example creates cynicism. Alignment creates trust and inspiration. A father in my workshop applied this principle with his teenage son, who was struggling with screen addiction. Rather than continuing futile lectures, he focused on modeling healthy technology habits himself. Within weeks, without direct confrontation, his son began initiating conversations about his own screen use. Marcus Aurelius, despite being emperor of Rome, focused intensely on his own character development rather than criticizing others. In his private journal, he wrote, "Waste no more time arguing about what a good man should be one." This approach doesn't mean abandoning influence. Rather, it recognizes that the most powerful influence comes indirectly through example. When others witness someone living according to admirable principles, something resonates at a level deeper than intellectual agreement. Consider where your energy currently goes. How much toward critiquing others versus developing your own character? How much toward articulating values versus embodying them? The Stoics would advise shifting dramatically toward the latter in both cases. The paradox is that by focusing less on changing others and more on exemplifying your principles, you often become more influential, not less. People naturally notice and respect integrity, the alignment between words and actions, even when they disagree with the specific values being expressed. Start today. Identify one principle you value that you've been advocating to others. Commit to embodying it more fully yourself without comment or criticism of others' behavior. Notice what changes in both you and those around you. Rule number 10. Practice rational self-discipline. No man is free who is not master of himself. Epictetus, who had been born into slavery but achieved inner freedom, understood that external liberty means little without the capacity for self-governance. Self-discipline in the Stoic tradition isn't about harsh self-denial or rigid control. It's about aligning your actions with your highest values through the exercise of reason rather than being driven by momentary impulses, social pressures, or unconscious habits. This principle directly challenges contemporary messages that authentic living means following every desire and emotional prompting. The Stoics recognize that true freedom comes not from indulging every impulse, but from the capacity to choose which impulses deserve expression. Identify one area where your actions routinely contradict your stated values, perhaps related to health, relationships, work ethics, or personal growth. Implement a small, specific constraint that brings behavior into better alignment with values. Don't try to overhaul your entire life at once. Start with manageable constraints that build the muscle of self-discipline gradually. Perhaps it's committing to 30 minutes of focused work before checking emails, or turning devices off an hour before sleep, or pausing for 10 seconds before responding when irritated. A software developer I worked with recognized that his value of being fully present with his family contradicted his habit of constantly checking his phone during evenings at home. Rather than attempting a complete digital detox, he implemented a simple constraint. Devices remained in a drawer between dinner and his children's bedtime. This manageable boundary built the capacity for larger changes. The Stoics emphasize that effective self-discipline requires clarity about values. Without knowing what matters most to you, attempts at self-discipline become arbitrary rules rather than meaningful constraints. Take time to articulate your core principles clearly so that your self-discipline serves authentic purpose. This approach isn't about perfection, but progress. Seneca noted that even the wise person doesn't remain at the same level of virtue constantly, but falls and rises again. What matters is the overall trajectory and the commitment to return to principles after inevitable lapses. Modern psychology confirms what the Stoics intuited. Willpower functions like a muscle that strengthens with appropriate exercise but fatigues with overuse. Structure your environments to reduce unnecessary willpower demands. Create systems that make virtuous choices easier and less dependent on moment-by-moment resolve. Remember that rational self-discipline is not self-punishment, but self-liberation. It's the development of the capacity to act according to your highest self rather than your most impulsive self. This capacity forms the foundation for any meaningful achievement and contribution. Rule number 11. Embrace cosmopolitanism. Human beings are born for the sake of each other, wrote Marcus Aurelius, expressing the Stoic principle of cosmopolitanism, the recognition that we are citizens not merely of our local communities but of the world, connected fundamentally to all other humans. This perspective predated modern globalism by millennia. The Stoics recognized that artificial boundaries of nationality, ethnicity, social class, and political affiliation mask our essential kinship. They taught that reason, the defining characteristic of humanity, unites us more fundamentally than any differences divide us. In practice, cosmopolitanism means expanding our circle of concern beyond those who look, think, and live like us. It means recognizing that the cashier, the immigrant, the political opponent, and the distant stranger all share the same fundamental capacity for reason, love, grief, joy, and suffering. Try this perspective exercise. When interacting with someone you perceive as different or opposed to you, silently acknowledge, like me, this person seeks happiness and wishes to avoid suffering. Like me, this person has known disappointment and joy. Like me, this person will someday die. This isn't sentimental but practical. Cosmopolitanism doesn't require liking everyone or approving of all behaviors. It requires recognizing our shared humanity even while addressing real differences and conflicts. A corporate leader applied this principle during tense merger negotiations. Rather than viewing the other team as opponents to be defeated, she consciously reminded herself of their shared goals for organizational success, despite different approaches. This shift from adversarial to cooperative framing led to significantly better outcomes for both sides. Hierocles, a Stoic philosopher, suggested visualizing our relationships as concentric circles: self, family, friends, community, humanity. He recommended regularly practicing drawing the outer circles inward, training ourselves to care about those initially perceived as distant or different. Modern research confirms the Stoic intuition that expanding our circle of concern benefits us as well as others. Prosocial behavior activates reward centers in the brain, reduces stress, and correlates with greater longevity and life satisfaction. Cosmopolitanism directly counters the tribal instincts that evolution has bequeathed us, instincts that may have aided survival in ancestral environments but now threaten our collective well-being in a connected world. The Stoic insight is that our rational nature can and should override these instincts when they no longer serve human flourishing. Begin practicing cosmopolitanism by identifying where your circle of concern currently ends, whose suffering registers emotionally with you and whose doesn't. Then deliberately extend compassionate attention beyond that boundary, recognizing that the moral relevant fact about others is their humanity, not their proximity or similarity to you. Rule number 12. Conduct regular self-examination. I will keep constant watch over myself and, most usefully, will put each day up for review. In this simple statement, Seneca describes what may be the most transformative Stoic practice: the daily self-examination or evening review. Unlike modern self-help approaches that often emphasize affirmation over honest assessment, the Stoics insisted on rigorous self-examination. Without clear awareness of our patterns, progress becomes impossible. As Epictetus noted, "He who does not know what the world is, does not know where he is, and he who does not know for what purpose the world exists, does not know who he is, nor what the world is." The evening review consists of 3 basic questions. What did I do well today? What did I do poorly? What could I do differently tomorrow? This practice isn't about self-judgment but self-knowledge. By regularly examining your actions against your principles, you create the feedback loop necessary for meaningful growth. Without this loop, we tend to repeat the same patterns while wondering why our circumstances never change. Try this practice nightly for 1 week. Before sleep, reflect on the day's events with specific attention to your judgments, actions, and reactions. Note where you lived according to your principles and where you fell short. Identify concrete adjustments for tomorrow. A teacher implemented this practice focusing specifically on patience with challenging students. Each evening she noted instances where she responded with calm presence and those where she reacted impatiently. By bringing conscious awareness to these patterns, she could identify specific triggers and develop targeted strategies for improvement. The power of this practice lies in its regularity. Occasional self-reflection rarely creates lasting change. Daily examination builds the metacognitive awareness that allows you to interrupt automatic patterns as they arise, rather than merely regretting them afterward. Seneca emphasized that this review should be factual and non-punitive. I conceal nothing from myself, I omit nothing. The goal isn't self-flagellation, but honest assessment from which improvement can naturally flow. Marcus Aurelius practiced this discipline throughout his reign as emperor, producing his Meditations, essentially the journal of his self-examination, which has guided seekers of wisdom for nearly 2 millennia. If the leader of the known world could find time for this practice, surely we can as well. Beyond daily review, consider implementing quarterly deeper examinations. Block several hours to assess larger patterns in your life. Are you progressing toward becoming the person you aspire to be? Are your daily actions aligned with your professed values? What adjustments to your environment, habits, or focus would create greater alignment? A business owner I worked with scheduled quarterly personal board meetings with himself. Using the Stoic framework of self-examination, he evaluated his progress in character development with the same seriousness he brought to business metrics. This practice regularly revealed blind spots and growth opportunities that daily reviews had missed. Remember that the purpose of self-examination is not perfection, but progress. The Stoics understood that moral development, like physical training, happens incrementally through consistent practice and honest feedback. Each recognition of error becomes not a source of shame, but an opportunity for adjustment. Begin tonight. Set aside 10 minutes before sleep for this practice. Answer the 3 questions with specificity rather than generality. Note particular instances, interactions, and decision points. Over time, this simple practice will develop what the Stoics considered the most valuable skill: the ability to observe yourself objectively while living subjectively. Now that we've explored all 12 golden rules, let's draw them together into a cohesive approach to living. These principles aren't isolated techniques, but interconnected aspects of a comprehensive philosophy of life, one that has guided countless individuals through both ordinary and extraordinary challenges. The Stoic path begins with the fundamental recognition that our well-being depends not on controlling external circumstances, but on developing our inner character. It continues through practices that align our perceptions, judgments, and actions with this understanding. And it leads to a life of meaningful engagement with whatever circumstances we encounter. This doesn't mean detachment from the world. Quite the opposite. It means full participation without being enslaved by outcomes. The Stoic ideal isn't the absence of emotion, but the cultivation of healthy, proportionate emotions based on accurate judgments. I invite you to begin implementing these principles today. Start with whichever rule resonates most strongly with your current circumstances. Perhaps it's learning to distinguish between what you can and cannot control. Maybe it's practicing negative visualization to deepen gratitude for what you have. Or perhaps conducting the evening review is your most needed practice. Don't try to implement all 12 rules simultaneously. Begin with 1 or 2, practicing them consistently until they become second nature. Then add others gradually. Remember that Stoicism is not about intellectual understanding, but embodied wisdom, knowing in your bones, not just your mind, how to live well. The transformation available through these principles isn't instantaneous, but neither is it endlessly distant. Many people report significant shifts in their experience of life within weeks of consistent practice. The obstacles remain, but their power to disturb your equanimity diminishes. Your capacity to find meaning and purpose in any circumstance grows. As you continue this journey, I encourage you to explore the original Stoic texts. The Meditations of Marcus Aurelius, the Letters of Seneca, and the Discourses of Epictetus offer wisdom that has weathered the test of centuries. Unlike many contemporary self-help approaches, these teachings address the human condition at its deepest level. What I've shared today is merely an introduction, a practical distillation of principles that can be explored with limitless depth. But even this introduction, if applied consistently, contains everything necessary to transform your experience of life starting today. Remember, the purpose of philosophy is not to understand the world, but to change how we live within it. These 12 golden rules offer a pathway to living with clarity, courage, and wisdom, regardless of external circumstances. Begin now. Start where you are. Trust the process that has guided humans through challenges far greater than those we typically face today. The transformation is available to you starting today. Thank you for joining me on this exploration of timeless wisdom. Until next time, practice well